We have Mr. Chee. Chee is currently heading the review of the full suite of iN.LAB programs for the professional development of adult educators. And he also champions the TAE PCM framework and iN's pedagogical innovation and workplace learning initiatives and programs. Thank you, Chee, for joining us today. And Simon Freebody. Simon is currently co-principal investigator for a research project investigating technology on work. His area of research interests include skills, productivity, and management practices, and his areas of expertise include economics and statistics. He's currently Singapore's National Data Manager on OECD's Survey of Adult Skills, or PIAT, and has worked on numerous evaluations and research projects with IL, including the World Management Survey and the Business Performance and Skills Survey. So thanks, Simon, for joining us. And moderating the panel, Mr. Daryl Lim. Another Daryl?
Daryl.
Daryl is Specialist Adult Educator Curriculum Development with AEP, and he is also Deputy Managing Director of CET Global, which had partnered ours for some of the very fascinating concepts proposed here. Okay, so a very handsome panel today. But I'm sure there's a lot of intellectual capacity surpasses. Okay, over to you, Daryl. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you again. I've got a very, very distinguished group of members here in my team in this discussion. And I think before we go into the rich discussion, let me just briefly share how this whole idea of this InnovLogue came about. Well, after spending a bit of time speaking to Daryl, the other Daryl, not me.
Two hours, one.
Yeah. I was asking myself, damn, what does this mean for me? I'm already vying with 20,000 adult educators in Singapore. What does this mean to me? And what does this mean with all these digital transformations, moving into webinars, and webinar is probably already a passé, and all these technology, what does this, how am I supposed to then evolve as an adult educator, and how can I create a more value add for my learners? So I think before we move on to the questions, before I open the questions to the floor, let me just speak to Simon first to hear a bit more about whether he has any insights listening to Daryl.
Okay, I mean, I think it was a really interesting presentation. The work that we do in the research here, we like to focus a lot on the demand for skills. And this is a topic that I think sort of puts focus on that quite a bit. In Singapore, we're going to probably over the next 10 to 20 years have a massive influx of skills supply because we have, very good schools here, and as the workforce changes, you'll see those levels of literacy and numeracy gradually sort of go up. But the worst case scenario is we have a situation where we have a lot of really, really educated kids who are really, really smart, but it's not gelling with the demand for skills at the time. And yeah, I think focusing on these kind of discussions for what's the role of the TAE sector, making sure that works, I think that's important.
Chee?
Well, sorry, is this working?
I think so.
Yeah, indeed. I was just looking at Darryl's presentation, and many of the things that he mentioned about the TAE sector and how it has evolved. Something that is that we have sort of experienced at IL ourselves. So you know what? When we first started in IL, I think 2008. Basically, there was just we had ACTA, a couple of CPD programs, and that's about it. But I guess in 10 years, I think a lot has changed, and with it, the skills that are required for us within the organization also had to change. So I came in just training ACTA. I was a teacher. So when I came in, I went through the whole from secondary school to polytechnic and then adult learning. And when I came in, I was training ACTA. I was doing a bit of curriculum development. I was doing some assessment. And if I were to look back and I say, wow, the things I'm doing now totally different from what I started doing. So that's how, really I think every sector will change very rapidly. We have to just be on our toes and say, you know what, I can't hold on to. You have your core strengths, you have your experiences that nobody can take away. But at the same time, I think we need to be very nifty, and that's something that that's something that is very real if we want to continue to do well.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, first question. Anyone would like to pose the first question? No? Okay, if not, let me just start talking to Daryl first. Daryl.
Okay, Daryl.
Daryl, can you share with us some of these skills that adult educators should probably look at? And I mean, you briefly mentioned about career advisory, business development, but how does this cope with the current situation?
Okay. Well, I guess we'll continue doing what we're doing, right? We're good at it, but it needs to evolve further, and we need technology, right? So that's clear. So you need to decide what will be interesting for you as a practitioner, and where do you see yourself? So do some reading, start to think and reflect on what role do I want to play. I think that's your own career is going to evolve, right? So that's one. Two is, there's different skills in virtual facilitation. In my previous life, I looked at this in terms of virtual classrooms and it being a facilitator, bringing in different learning examples and experiences. And we had facilitators who were classroom facilitators. All right? And then they go online and they think they can do the same thing, but they can't see the students. All right? So then we realized that they need virtual engagement skills, virtual teaming skills. These are skills that they currently didn't even know of, right? So how do you know whether a student is engaged if you can't see them? What are the other things you're going to have to learn to do? We need to learn those skills ourselves, right? That's quite interesting though. It's a little bit, had an interview on the phone and then you're not sure whether you answered the question well because you can't see how they responded to your answer. It's the same thing. It's a different skill you need to learn. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity to grow with this sector. But I think it starts with you deciding where you want to take this journey with us.
I think, as just adding on to what Daryl mentioned, it is, we have seen from iN.LAB, right, when we went out and talked to advisors that increasingly, I think a lot of us know this, increasingly the demand for the usual way of, the traditional way of delivering training is diminishing, right? Because enterprises just don't have time, right? And sometimes you can invest a lot in the training, but the person goes, or maybe a new business model kicks in, and then whatever you have to train them in is no longer relevant. So business owners are very sensitive to all these things nowadays, right? So over at iN.LAB, similarly, we offered programs, right? But very quickly we realized that, actually it's not just that, what does it translate to? At the end of the day, because we come into contact with all these aspiring, new, experienced adult educators, where do they go after this? So that's something that played on our mind for quite a fair bit, and we were very interested to find out. And hence, we went into alternative modes of learning. That's what we were supposed to do. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have to keep ourselves on our toes. And that's when we went into things like workplace learning. It really opened a whole new horizon for all of us. So again, just mentioning earlier that there are certain skills that we have to now pick up, because if you were to talk about what does education, what does TAE mean for enterprises, you actually do need to engage them, right? And engaging them means, just now Daryl was mentioning, relationship management. So that is very important because it means you're not just standing in front of a classroom and just delivering a lesson. It means you have to actually go out there, talk to enterprises, all the way from the CEO down to the staff on the ground. And you have to be well engaged with them quite a lot. And listening, for example, just really listening and being very open. It's a terribly difficult thing to do because you want to come with your own solutions, and like Singaporeans, we just want to troubleshoot. And you bring out a problem, especially the guys, you bring out a problem, you want to solve the problem. But really that's not the most effective way. So really, I think for the TAE sector, it is about taking a step back and saying, hey, what do all the things we do translate to? And being very deliberate about that and holding that space. And then maybe some new business models might emerge, some new solutions might emerge. Many of it can be supported by technology, I'm sure. But it's really just holding the space for a while. So I guess that is I find it a very exciting time because of the circumstances that we're in.
Well, it's difficult for me on this one because I'm not a teacher, I'm not an educationist either. But I do find very interesting, Daryl, what you were saying about this idea of learning as you go, learning as you're doing it. And because I've had that experience in my work since I started learning, actually, figuring things out, learning on my own. But I don't know the extent to which that's shared amongst other people. There may be still some mindset out there that work is work. You learn how to do what you do. Once you know, you deploy that in the workplace, and your job is done, sort of thing. And I don't know. Maybe you guys have some insights. Can you teach that mindset? Is that a mindset that can be changed in somebody who's say 40 years old and they've been doing the same thing? Suddenly they're presented with this idea, it's going to roll, and you've got to roll with it. And, you've got a pet dog in the house. Sure,
I've got some thoughts on that. So, and I'll put this to the audience as well. Have you ever felt you've been thrown in the deep end? Right? You're just thrown in there, you don't know really what to do, but you've been told to do it by your boss or whatever. And you just, through self-discovery, work out what to do. And you become an expert through practice, right? Self-learning. Now, the millennials today are very good at this. Alright? They're thrown in the deep end all the time. My analysts in the consulting world, we give them tasks, and we do this on purpose to see how they cope. It's not a bad skill to develop, and we're observing them as analysts, right? But what they're doing is they're jumping on TED Talks, right? YouTube. They're reading on their LinkedIn profiles. They might have remembered some article and then they go and find it. But can you imagine if this was structured a bit more by us? And what value that can bring to them and their ability to execute quality work and make an impact on the business. Because it is actually happening. It does happen all the time. But I think we could be smarter at facilitating and enabling that kind of learning rather than the traditional classroom-based 3 or 4 day program. I just looked at SMU, they have 96 programs, and I noticed that some of them, my competitors use their name in the title, and they probably get a facilitator from that organization for free. So I see some more commercialization in the TAE sector as well. We are offering 2 to 4 day programs, bite-sized learning, that will be building blocks of learning at beginner, intermediate, advanced level that keep morphing, keep evolving. And that's where the TAE sector needs to go. Rather than repeating the same type of learning for 30 years, it's not going to be the case anymore. We need to transform ourselves as practitioners.
Well, hearing what the three speakers just mentioned kind of brings back some memories of my first webinar that I had to do for IEL for one of the actor classes. I'm very used to face-to-face. I can see your reactions. I know how to react to that. I know how to react to your verbal actions and things like that. But in a webinar, you don't see the person. You don't see anyone. You only see words popping up of your face. And it was really difficult for me to react. Words becomes very important. Sometimes people put a question mark, it could mean someone is angry or someone is in shock or in confusion. We don't know. So what I did was, so I'm trying to put myself into the group of millennials. What I did was I actually started to watch online auctions. It kind of works the same way. I kind of think it works the same way because the auctioneer is trying to excite and interest the individual to take action to place an amount to say that, okay, I want this for this price and I'm going to bid higher. And that was how I started to learn about online auctions. And I think talking also about, moving further, talking about the new areas of where adult educators need to grow, things like career development, business consulting. I think this is something that I think adult educators, most of you here are probably adult educators. You realize that probably unknowingly you are already doing that in class. There will be that one or two learners that's going to come to you. So what does ACTA mean to me? Can I get a job? Can I find a job to develop new programs? How can I develop my career in this industry? And then of course there will be some HR people who will probably be also in your class asking you about what does all these skills mean? Skills maps, transformation maps, SkillsFuture, skills framework, what does all these mean to me, to my company? How does that work? So I think this will probably need to be more obvious in over the next few years in developing these skills to help us move into the next era, I guess. Yeah. So let me open up to the floor first. Anyone has any questions at this juncture? Yes.
My name is Zaid. I'm a lawyer and I teach law to adults. I'm also teaching at NTU, right? So I have a question in relation to the cost of transformation. You know, we're such a small country, small economy. The message that the government has sent to us over transformation, getting ready for the future, I think has already something. But when I deal with my clients, the biggest problem they face today is how to manage the cost, speed of transformation. It's not about whether we should get ready for the future, because now most SMEs in Singapore already accepted the government's pitch, the message, so there's no issue about it. So can the panel share with us your perspective of what it takes, what's the issue relating to cost and speed of transformation, and how can we accelerate the transformation to the next level?
I think the government are very aware of this. I think they are looking, they deconstructed WDA, right? So we've got Workforce Singapore, SkillsFuture Singapore, and SkillsFuture Singapore are responsible for exactly what you're talking about. It's preparing what other competencies required within each sector, and then the adoption to get out to the sector, get them to buy in and co-create and shape it to make sure that we get it right based on what the practitioners know. So that's currently happening with the TAE sector at this moment. So they will decide, you will decide. It will just be put into some model, framework and template, and then it will be thrown back at you and the training providers, the higher learning institutes, to implement, to reconfigure their curricula, to develop new curricula, new diplomas, and then look at how that gets delivered to the students continuously, right? So I think that there is a strategy, there is a framework in place, there is a roadmap. It's there, it doesn't exist. I think for me, there's this block in front of a lot of people that we need to move. So we have more inertia going forward. And that is, I think, just getting people educated and aware. They may buy in, but embarkation is taking the first step. And we need to decide that. So some of you, for example, the business consultancy, we go in and we do a diagnosis of the needs of the business, and then we design a 2-day program, and then we deliver on it. What if we really like that front end bit? We really need people to do more of that. Go in understanding the business needs, the gaps, shape, and then get facilitators to come in. Or you go to the next business to support them, and then you become a business consultancy, shifting to a skills architect, and that will eventually morph to full-time. All right? So I think that's what Daryl was alluding to. But I do think we still need to just take a step forward. And we're only getting the skills framework for the TAE sector now, right? So that'll take another, I don't know, maybe 8 months to a year before it's eventually launched and then adopted by the institutions. That's my take.
Personally, my heart goes out to SMEs. You know, they bear the brunt. Sometimes they don't know what hits them. Because, you know, they're just going about their daily lives. They have a little something going, you know. And sometimes if disruption comes along, and then they just, you know, step off the feet. I have 2 brothers who own micro SMEs. You know, they keep me very, very grounded about what happens out there, you know, every day. So, what role does the TAE professional play in this space? So that's something that, again, I think as we increasingly go into the area in INL, we begin to see that actually there are many things that we can do. But that means that we need to learn. We need to be able to go out there and say, you know what, okay, I'm not pushing courses to you, okay, when you talk about cost, so there are a million schemes in Singapore, you know, all from Spring, from WDA, from SSG, from WSG, there's many avenues, you know, to support enterprises in all their, you know, transformation efforts. Of course, how easily accessible is another thing, right? But it's the idea is that, you know, if you want support, then the government is there to do it. So that mitigates the cost a bit, but really sometimes the solutions might not be very costly at all. It's really just about going in to find out, so what is it that, you know, what are some pain points, what are some performance gaps, what are some real issues that you're facing in the organization, you know, as you try to take it forward. Knowing full well that, you know, because you read the news, these things are happening on the horizon, and you don't want to be swept away by them. So engaging the organization at that level, establishing some trust, I think that's key, because if the TAE professional goes in and you're some outsider, you have to gain their trust to say that, you know what, I'm really here to help. Okay, yes, I also need to learn a living. Okay, we'll have to find a way to make that work. But at the end of the day, we're looking at something long term. I'm not coming in to go out a 2-day program and I'm out. And I hope that all things, you know, things will just pick up. So I think it's that kind of mentality that can come in a bit more long term. Okay, the cost aside, all right, you have to think about what kind of solutions can be supported by technologies. There are loads of free technologies or very, very cheap technologies out there. I think a lot of people know. All right, really, you don't need to build. If you think of an idea, chances are somebody's already done it. It's just a matter of finding it. Okay, you just Google for it and say, somebody has it, and you can just try to you know, use that. So there are plenty of possibilities out there. It's just being creative, being resourceful, being open, go look out, and then try to help the organizations along. Transformation is not a overnight thing, right? It's not going to tomorrow, suddenly I'm this totally new entity. It's going to happen in very incremental steps. And that's something actually very doable, you know, when you're there to support. So at the end of the day, the TAE professional might not really, it's just a term. But what you are is really just about, you know, from the outside trying to help. If you have to learn new things, you have to learn new things. You have to use whatever expertise you have in training and delivery, use that. You know, you want to design a new learning experience for some of the staff, for one person, for one department to, you know, it's just that, and it's just really on the go. So I think that is one possibility.
Yeah, I mean, not to add much, but it sounds like if this is an investment that the technology exists, we know that it works, it's relatively low risk, then the only thing stopping could be education, really. But I mean, there's we do have Spring, and we have these kind of agencies that offer relief for SMEs and things like this where cost might be. But yeah, apart from what's already been said.
But I do think, I mean, there's 160,000 SMEs, right? So I do think SMEs need to put aside some cash and they need to invest as well. Of course they can get government funding, and that's fantastic. I mean, to be honest, Singapore is a world leader in this because they see the value and they think ahead. So I think it's a combination. You know, you've got to have skin in the game to see the value, and if you don't, then the likelihood of sustainability is going to keep dropping. So you've got to plan for this. You've got to invest, and you've got to educate your people to prepare for this transformation.
And I think I just have a bit to add as well. I also second Richie's statement saying that the government is very supportive and is providing a lot of tools to give to SMEs as well as large organizations to develop their own capabilities. So I think the fundamental question you're asking, how do we get up to speed and how do we manage this time and cost, is really about being in the know. I think career maps, skills maps, all these gives us the tools to help us to be agile in that sense. So the work that I do is basically helping organizations develop their own competency profiles, letting them know how do they operate as an organization so that if there is a disruption somewhere, how are you able to then move your manpower, mobilize certain people, activate certain skills that may not have been used in the very first place. Because of disruption, this suddenly comes into play. So this also brings that question of that notion of, in future, is there really such a thing called high potentials? What is high potentials today? Are you able to predict really what is the high potentials? So that notion of learning to learn, learning how to learn, that culture of learning to learn, I think is something that's very important. But fundamentally, if we could give our employees, if we could give ourselves the tools of finding out what are the skills required to do your job, I think this helps us to be able to plan our careers, to be able to plan our businesses, and to be able to manage these disruptions that are coming in that we may not even know of. Anyone has any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I know this digital transformation not only affect this learning as well as job opportunity. So that day I was watching this tech news. One of the speaker, one of the personnel was asking the speaker, said, you know, now we are very worried because machine AI and all going to replace our job. So the speaker was saying that you asked the wrong question. The right question is to ask is to how do the human collaborate with this machine to get a better output. So the speaker gave examples. For example, if the human can produce one unit and the machine can produce one unit, combined together, they can improve three units. So my question to you, Daryl, is that you're mentioning that this, in USA there are how many millions truck drivers are going to be
3.5 million.
3.5, and also Uber is going to have this driverless cars. So my question to you is that in this case, what is the driver going to do? How do they add value to it, or what kind of role they play to add value to it, so they can make themselves more employable? Otherwise, economy will be in trouble because most of the driver will be out of job.
Sure.
So how do you solve this problem?
Okay, I think if the strategy of a business is to displace people as part of this strategy, not completely, because we know most from the research are not doing that, right? They are augmenting human performance and productivity by bringing in technology to work with humans, to enable them to be more effective, right? But there are some strategies which will reduce cost and displace people. So they have a responsibility to prepare their people, to transition them. Now that does not mean that they will displace them from the company. It will displace them from that role of a truck driver, all right, in the next 7 years. So, because Their routine is to drive from A to B every day and back to A to B, back to A, all right? So it's a set route, there's GPS. They're now looking at the anomalies of those paths before, and it's going to take another 5 or 6 years before they displace these individuals. So they have that amount of time to prepare them for a career change, right? And they need to invest to help enable them with new skills. And they will rely on the TAE sector, whether it's in the US or whatever country, to help prepare them by looking at their passions, their base skill set, and what are other roles they could learn and be interested in learning, and accelerate them into that space. And you will need to be part of that process to enable them. I think that is very, very important. But there needs to be a platform, government need to be involved, businesses need to take responsibility. But remember, we are going to maintain. So one of our clients just acquired a big robotics company in the US for a Singapore company here, right? Now initially I would have thought some of the staff would be feeling pretty vulnerable. But actually it was part of a growth strategy. So then one business line, they're now moving from one business line to 4 business lines, right? Because they're leveraging off the technology, the robotics company that they purchased, to actually have a growth strategy. And they're not displacing any of their staff, but the staff will need to be reskilled to work side by side the social robotics and the machines that will be part of that new business growth. Right. So it's about educating and preparing them and getting comfortable with technology.
So, for these drivers, they've been driving for so many years, 40 years now. So how are you going to, learn new skills? Most of them are having so many. How very simple, like say A to B. So what kind of job can they get? So it's quite difficult for them to. How do they play as a role in this driving business?
Well, these are very, very good questions, and they'll be asking these questions to their employers right now, right? Because we need to be implicit, we need to be explicit with these employees to prepare them, okay? But they've got to be motivated to still deliver, right? But I think it's just a one-on-one conversation. Every individual is going to be different. They're going to have different skills and hobbies, and they can take their hobbies outside and maybe explore that as a new revenue and employment opportunity, depending on their skills. So someone needs to sit down with them, understand and map out a career plan, and maybe a qualification. And who supplements, who supports that, whether it's government, the business, to prepare them while they're still in their current role? That's a question. But I think, people need, organizations and government need to take responsibility, because it's going to affect them in the long run if they don't. It's going to affect the economy, right? Look at China, 75% of the workforce could be gone by 2035. So they've got, 20 years to prepare for that transformation. So they need to start the transformation plan. They need to start looking at funding. I know the Singapore government is investing $2 billion in technology enablement to take IT technical people and develop their skills even further to enable the economy of Singapore so that they can be prepared to add value based on their needs, right? So that's going to continue the evolvement.
If I may just add, earlier on you talked about career advisory skills being something that is important. I think increasingly so, because you're not going to have a straightforward, one or two job kind of career trajectory for the rest of your life. So the ability to be able to make, informed decisions, to be able to be advised correctly, at that point in time, I think that's a role that again the TAE professional can play. We are not just mere, transmitters of knowledge. It's also about guiding, advising. So, if you talk about, again, transformation is very scary, right? It's like one whole group of people losing their jobs, or 600 people taking on an entirely new role. But it just doesn't happen like that because the individual is unique, right? Everyone is unique, has own strengths, own motivations, own career aspirations. So it has to happen at an individual level. And who is there to make this happen? I'll give you a case in point. As I mentioned, right, so because we, back at IL, we have a team of learning designers. And I have a colleague who, her strength is graphic design. Alright, so she's very good at drawing, she's very artistic and everything. And she was brought in to help with all this e-learning, but e-learning in your usual form and things like that, those very traditional formats. But increasingly, we know that there is no appetite for that, and it's just going to take a long time to develop things like that. So, hence, where should we go from here? So, increasingly, people are on mobile, and you talk about designing mobile learning, it's very, very different. It's a totally different set of principles because of the size and the screen estate that you have. The thinking behind mobile learning design versus just normal e-learning design, they're very, very different. So, to me, it is, for my colleague, I was just saying, hey, you know what? Is it time to move on, to see how we can support your own growth as well as the organization direction? And I just posted the challenge and said, have you ever thought about going into this mobile learning? They said, I don't know. I myself, I don't know much about it. I have to learn. So I said, why don't you teach me? Why don't you teach all of us? You say, go into this space, and you have a strength which is the aesthetic part. You know how to draw, you know how to design, you know how to make it very pretty. So anything that comes out, I'm very sure anything that comes out on the phone is going to look very nice. So I asked her that, and she said, yeah, she can see the value in that. She can see how it is going to be a growth for her. And she took it on. And painful first steps, hitting the drafts, but same thing, go on YouTube, go on the internet, download some stuff, just run with it, and next thing you know, she came out with stuff. And they look pretty nice for somebody who's just starting out. So I think my point I'm trying to make here is that somebody has to play that role to help all these people say, you know what, this role is, maybe the current role is increasingly being marginalized. So then what's next? What's next for you? Where do you think you can go? Now you have to then try to match that between the individual and where the organization is heading, right? So who plays that role? Us. We can come in to help them do that. How do you do that? You need certain skills. You need to understand about career development, you know how to advise individuals accordingly. You need to know about the industry. You need to know about the specific skills within the industry that's needed now as well as in the future. A lot of things for us to know. So I think that's something that
Let me pick on Simon for a while, because Simon's been pretty quiet. Okay, Simon, I just want to ask this question. It's more like a personal question, really. In the midst of all these digital transformations and all these disruptive technology and bits and pieces of this, are there any significant insights that's happening in terms of the business landscape? What are companies doing to cope with these changes? I think bits and pieces were mentioned by Daryl, mergers, acquisitions. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's this question about unemployment and technological unemployment. I think everything you said before is right. And the TAE sector has that role, that's great. But I think, the orthodox economic position on technological unemployment, whether businesses will start shedding employees, the orthodox position is this is impossible. This will not happen. That there'll be churn, but there'll be overall productivity will just increase, output will increase. But there have been quite, I would say, respectable studies that have come out suggesting that this may not be the case. So I'm not saying either way. I don't have an opinion myself, but they could start firing people. I mean, this could happen, and the upside for us here in this room is that means our job becomes even more important, right? I mean, the TAE sector then becomes something that really has to take up these people and replace them, and as you say, train them properly and adequately. I think it's a real question, though, as to whether or not the sorts of things you're talking about when businesses say, okay, we're going to change our processes, we're going to change the way we do things here, employ this technology, and these people who are being displaced, we'll find somewhere else for them. This may happen in some instances, it may not happen in other instances. I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, I think the career advisory is going to be a very key track for this sector. And understanding the business landscape will be critical to look at the skills that will be transferable for roles that will be obsolete in time to come. But remember, most roles are just part of will be automated, not the whole. So it's actually upskilling, reskilling, reconstruction of the whole is what the majority are saying. But yes, some businesses do look at a strategy where they are looking at cost and displacing employees as part of that strategy. But that's not the entire strategy. And as I said, I think the government and the business have a responsibility to prepare these people. And there are career building platforms now available where they look at putting in your skills and then what are the roles and occupations across sectors that are now available, right? So these platforms will become even more pertinent for certain roles that are more susceptible to automation.